Good afternoon, everyone. We will give a minute or two that more people joining and we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking your time joining our H-1B webinar. As you may know, that the H-1B Executive Proclamation came out on September 19th. And there's couple communication outreach from ISSC to our department contacts and our foreign nationals in H-1B visas. This certainly create some anxiety, but our team would like to host this webinar just to share some information, clarification, along with the practice for us to moving forward, continue supporting our employees. This is our team. You all may be familiar with us. My name is Tony Gonzalez. I'm the Director of International Faculty and Scholar Services. I have Catalina Ellis, Eva Herhamani, Morgan Green here as well. Also, our other staff, Sophia DeSante and Giuliano Roberts are all here. This webinar will be presented by Eva Morgan, who manage our H-1B caseloads, and the rest of our team members will manage the Q&A session. If you have any questions throughout the presentation or at the end of the presentation, feel free to input your question. We will go over them at the end of this presentation, or we can answer your question during the presentation. The agenda for today, if we move to next slide, we will go over the Executive Proclamation. Some clarification implication will be addressed, and we will be sharing other updates, and we will open questions for everybody. And I am going to turn over to Eva.
Okay. Well, I won't read the whole proclamation. This is kind of a summary that USCIS posted on their site, just kind of summarizing the proclamation. The original document was sort of vague in places. So that's why we kind of came out with slightly panicked, I guess, notices. It made it sound like people who were out of the US wouldn't be able to come in unless we paid a $100,000 fee. So some emails went out encouraging people to come back if they could, that sort of thing. But in short, on September 19th, 2025, so that was a Friday afternoon, this proclamation was announced stating that any new H-1B petitions would be subject to a $100,000 payment as a condition for eligibility. and for anybody outside the US, meaning that they wouldn't be able to come in unless this fee had been paid. But the administration has clarified how to pay it, and then later kind of some clarifications that everybody had. And this does come from, I'll just pop over to it right now, the USCIS site itself. They always have updates and explanations. They're sometimes hard to find, but the explanations are here, and the sort of in writing clarifications are found on this site. But we'll move on to just some key issues. It's basically meant to curb abuse, or what the government considers abuse of the H-1B program, particularly from the tech industry. The government is claiming that there's an over-reliance, primarily from the tech industry, on big employers like Google, Amazon, those really big employers, on H-1B, which is cutting US worker wages and opportunities. And the government's also concerned about third-party contractors. So this, of course, really applies more to the private sector. These would be like sort of temp agencies or placement agencies. There's been some just concern and fraudulent practices involved with third-party placement agencies. Also a concern is higher unemployment for US graduates in computer science fields, and just that this is demotivating US students to enter IT and STEM. And, could be a national security concern if we don't have any of, US students wanting to go into those important fields because they're not going to get jobs, basically. So the proclamation, so key issues for employers and mainly us from the ASU, from the university standpoint, the proclamation did not distinguish between cap exempt and cap subject employers. I mean, myself, I kept expecting them to clarify that it didn't apply to universities, but that has not been, in fact, it applies to both. The text of the proclamation referred to the upcoming lottery, which is related to private sector. And that lottery takes place, I think in March for the April season. But it also says that it applies to any new petitions submitted after September 21st, 2025. So that dating, I guess, kind of covers universities and other nonprofits that are cap exempt. Some exceptions may be granted for individuals, but not industry-wide. That was also sort of mentioned, but not very clear. But there was some clarification put out that this would be extraordinarily rare. So I think they are trying to stem a flood of everybody trying to claim that their hire is in the national interest. I don't really know how, we just don't know how successful a request like that would be. And it does say that this will be for 12 months. And I did mention reviewed for potential extension. I guess, I don't know if they've really said that, but I guess that's always there. There's some language in the proclamation that it's like the start of H-1B reform. So I guess we'll just see in 12 months, whether it's going to be extended or changed. Some key clarifications that came out, like post-proclamation, is that the $100,000 fee will only apply to consular petitions for beneficiaries outside the US from 9/21/25 onward. So it does not apply to change of status, change of employer, extension, or amendment. So obviously those would all be for people who are already in the US either on H-1B or, um, on F1, on J1, TN, whatever, and we can change their status. The fee, if we were going to pay it, is payable at pay.gov. We have to pay it first and then include like a receipt with the petition. But we have basically been told, I think by OGC, that ASU just cannot support this fee. So that for that, for ASU, that means basically we're limited to the change of status, change of employer, extension amendments. And then we'll have to look at other ways to bring people who you want to hire who are outside the US. So it does not impact current H-1B employees' ability to travel internationally. So if somebody already has a valid notice, they're welcome to travel. It does not impact a current employee from traveling to a home country to get an H-1B stamping. That would mean like if they needed to renew their H-1B stamp in their passport, they can still go to the consulate and do that. They're not going to get charged or have to show proof of having paid this fee. It does not impact getting an extension, change of employer, and it doesn't impact any lawful permanent resident petitions. So there's no kind of cross impact on that. And I just concluded here some further resources if you're, this is probably an important one. I think people have absorbed the information, but we put this together for our own ISSC website, understanding the proclamation, and it's just kind of a Q&A. You just click on whatever you're questioning, and hopefully the answer is there. Obviously, if there's some clarification needed, people are welcome to just reach out to us. This goes to that statement I already showed you. And then if you're looking for some amusing reading, this is from the White House, and this is the text of the proclamation, and it kind of goes into their reasoning and just goes on and on basically, but that is where you could find all of that if you're interested. But I wanted to touch on bringing people from abroad that you want to hire and how this does impact those decisions. For postdocs, we're going to look to J. We already do. We bring a lot of postdoctoral scholars on J1 exchange visitor visa. And I want to emphasize that it is exchange. It's meant for an exchange, like a cultural and academic exchange. It's kind of the classic somebody looking for experience. It's confusing because we kind of think of it as an employment visa because you can be employed, but you don't have to. People can come and not all postdocs, I guess, are paid, or J1s, not all J1s are paid, but it's not everybody's eligible for J1. So, it's for postdocs, for visiting professors, more short-term scholars, not for tenure track faculty, also not for staff. There's been some concern with some people don't want J because their country had been on a skills list and they might get that 2-year home residency requirement, which can be kind of burdensome to either meet or get out of. But a lot of countries have been taken off that list. For example, China and India are no longer part of that skills list. So there's less concern for that. We may be able to change, we can change J1 to H-1B, but we still want to be cautious with that. We want to make sure that the J1 time has been exhausted or used, or if, they were brought on as a postdoc, now they have an opportunity to be faculty. That can change things. I mean, generally, the university has looked to consular processing to change J to H. But when we can't do that, we don't want to, we're going to need to look at changing. OGC may still want to review them, to be honest. We've been kind of seeking some clarification on that and haven't quite got it yet, but I would say if there's anybody we're needing to change, just go ahead and reach out to us and we will work with you on that. Some other considerations I'll go through more quickly. We do have, I think 16 TN people on TN that I know of. TN's very flexible. It's part of the USMC, so the United States, Mexico, Canada trade agreement. So it is only for Canadians and Mexican citizens. And the position must fall under one of the occupational categories on this agreement, which you can find, or just email me or Morgan. We can help piece it together. The titles are just kind of like accountant, biologist, and then teacher at a university, which is the one we often use. But it's pretty flexible. Postdocs, the title doesn't really matter. It's more what the person does, I guess. And teacher is quite a catch-all. So any teaching title would fit in TN. It's fairly simple. There's two ways to go about it. We can do a petition to USCIS or just issue a support letter. Canadians don't need visas in their passport, so they can just come to the border. Mexican nationals do need to get that visa, but they would make an appointment at the consulate and present everything there. It is supposed to be temporary, so for long-term positions, if you're bringing somebody as like an assistant professor, we could bring them on TN, change them to H-1B a little bit later, and then, consider lawful permanent residence, things like that. E3 is also basically, we only have a handful of E3s. It's only for Australia. It's also part of some trade agreement, but it's basically H-1B for Australians. It's the same. We also have to do a labor conditions application, so it has to meet a prevailing wage. But there's a little differences here and there. We can also switch them to H-1B later if needed. But if you have an Australian you want to hire, just reach out to us and we can help with that. The main thing we might look at for somebody that you want to bring that we can't, for this year, we wouldn't be able to bring on H-1B would be O1. This is a non-immigrant visa for individuals with extraordinary ability in science, arts, education, business, or athletics who are coming to the US to work in their field. So of course they have to be in a position that is related to what they're known for, what they do. There are higher eligibility requirements, but it could be suitable for research scientists or tenure track faculty. We don't have to go over every one of them, but basically it's meeting 3 of 8 criteria. So people who've won awards for their work, published widely. I think even more important than being published widely is being cited. So if people are citing to that person's work, if they're considered an expert in the field that other people look to, that is something that is considered for O1 eligibility. If their work, if they're an artist, if they're in magazines or artistic exhibitions, members of leading organizations, things like that, high salary, distinguished employment. It's a little bit higher, I guess, in a way than H-1B. H-1B is more related to the actual requirement, the minimum education, and whether somebody, if there's a straight line from their education and degree work to what they're doing. Some further considerations for O1 is that while it's indefinitely renewable, so H-1B is, we can only do up to 6 years unless they have the permanent resident, an approved I-140. O1, you can just keep renewing, but after an initial 3 years, they renew in 1 year extensions, which becomes pretty cumbersome, after the 5th year of someone's employment. So normally we don't like to see O1 forever and ever. It is handled through outside legal. So you're going to be paying those legal fees. It's more like 4,000 to 7,000 with the premium processing. It often takes several months for the firm to prepare the petition, so you really have to plan in advance, even for extensions. That's why, those 1 year, anybody with faculty on O will know, like, you sort of get their approval and then a few months down the road, you have to start the extension again. You're almost always in a process of in an immigration process, which can be tiring. So, so you may be able to change them to H after they come, because this H proclamation, it is, I guess, about bringing people on H. For the private sector, it's harder to sort of, I won't say get around, but to get around. But for universities, we may be able to bring people on different categories and then change them later. Some other considerations, it's just that not everybody is eligible, obviously, for TN and E3 because those are nationality based. And for O1, some people in the beginning of their career, so who are more at the lecturer or assistant professor level, they just may not have all of those, they may not be meeting all that criteria, but they may not be suitable for J1 either. So we can do our best. We may need to send CVs to the law firm to see if O1's a possibility, but we may just have to hire them next year, hope that this goes away and we can hire next year, but we'll just have to see. I also want to make a note, as I just explained, though, there's really no last minute O1 petition. And I know everybody tries to hire early and get everything done in advance, but we always have a few last minute hires in June and July. And while, Morgan and I can kind of turn an H-1B petition around pretty quickly when we have everything, the O1s just take a lot longer. It goes to the firm. We can't guarantee how fast they work. They need to do their due diligence. So it's just that may be an issue, that it just takes more time to get an O1. We also want to be aware of the end date of your like any employees you have on OPT now, double check, when is their EAD expiration, because we're going to want to do a change of status, obviously, if you want to retain them. But we need to make sure that they don't fall out of status. And we always have have issues from like spring, people graduating in May, and then you want to bring them as faculty in August for fall. And, if they don't have OPT or they're on OPT, but it runs out, we just need to make sure basically that we're filing change of status within their validity period. Sometimes we have people who just aren't, like the times just don't work out, so they'll go home for the summer. We'll do consular and bring them back, but we can't do that this time. So we just need to make sure that everybody's kind of their end date and their new start date at ASU lines up. So that's something to be considerate of. And again, we may be able to change ASU sponsored J1s to H-1B after they've kind of used at least some time in J1. But we can't bring people with the intent to just change them right after. And people always say, oh, can we bring them on J because it's quick and then we'll change them as soon as they get here. We just really don't want to abuse our J program so that, using J1 still has to have the intent of more of an exchange, a temporary position. And then if something evolves into a more permanent position, we can look at changing them to H-1B then. I threw these in. They're not related to the proclamation, but they're just some other updates that we've been hearing and sending out. I believe it was mentioned in the executive proclamation that prevailing wages may go up. And that is something just, even on the news, I've been hearing about that. The concern is that the prevailing wages are too low and it's undercutting basically the American workforce wages. Department of Labor releases their updates to the SOC codes and prevailing wages every year on July 1st. So I don't think they would do that off cycle. So I think we're safe until July 1st. I mean, that's kind of every year. Every year they go up, they go down. Some of the codes change, but they are looking at that maybe a lot of these wages are too low. That the government's basically been setting them too low and it's pulling everything down for everybody else. So the administration also proposed a new rule. This isn't final, it's a proposal that would give H-1B applicants more chances in the lottery according to their assigned wage level. So not to get too far in the weeds, but when we look at prevailing wage, we also look at, there's different, for each code and each wage, there's wage levels. So when you meet kind of the minimum requirements, it's level 1. When there's higher requirements, it's 2. If you're requiring, if the government says an entry level position should be a bachelor's and you're asking for a PhD, that could make it a level 4 or something like that. So what they're doing is saying they want to weight basically the more skilled people higher, so they would have more chances in the lottery rather than kind of awarding H-1B for entry level, if that makes sense. This doesn't really impact us because we don't participate in that lottery, but it impacts our students and the job market in general. So if all these international students are missing out on the H-1B lottery, you may see more, I'm sure you already do, but you may see even more students looking to be hired by universities. And just know for yourself and your departments, I don't know if this impacts you, but that it just may be a harder job market for our international students. The other thing is third country visa appointments are highly discouraged. They were kind of always we always encourage people to go to their home country if they need to get a visa. But it was very possible to, for example, go to Canada, go to Mexico, or if somebody had a conference in some country, they could also renew their visa there. But the government put out a notice basically telling people to stop doing that and that they would be kind of, I don't know if they're phasing out appointments. They did kind of make an exception for people who don't have consular services in their country, like Iran. But they also said that if you already have an appointment, it probably wouldn't be canceled. But just so you know, if you have people who are traveling all the time or take students on study abroad programs, they may have to do some serious travel planning, I guess, because they're getting, I don't really know why, but frowning upon that. Some other reminders, processing or updates, I guess. Processing times have really slowed down for standard filing. Right now, the posted time on USCIS site is 6.7, but it's really, we still have things pending from April. So, which is 7 months. And we just may see even slower, I had to blame everything on the administration, and I don't really know why it would affect USCIS, but when I first started, it's also due to COVID, but we would see 8 to 12 months. We nearly had a few people who ran out of their 240 days extended work authorization. So I hope we don't get to that point again. But just do know that unfortunately, I've been caught out. I told some people when they submitted it, like that things were being processed 3 to 4 months, and then they just slowed, they just put the brakes on, and now we're still waiting for their petitions. And it really can be sped up or slowed down, you know, without any notice. So that brings us to premium processing. And I mean, Morgan and I always love premium processing, but we don't pay those bills. So we just encourage, you might want to consider premium even for extensions because of that slowdown. It impacts people's ability to travel internationally. And that's, not just people's, sometimes people have personal travel, but if people are traveling for conferences or again, study abroad programs, things like that, they may need that flexibility to travel. They also need to carry, I mean, this has always been true, but it's been noted by the government many times recently that that foreign nationals need to carry proof of status at all times. And to be honest, not all the officers, even though somebody might have an extension, they have a receipt notice, they're still here lawfully, they're working lawfully. We're just kind of concerned that not all the officers get that right away. It's much easier to pull out a valid notice and say, look, here I am, I'm in H-1B and I'm still valid. So that's my preference, but again, I know not everybody's budget allows for premium for every petition, but that's something to consider and something to, please just try to get us those extensions and amendments well in advance of the person's current timing out. And lastly is, I think this is the last one. The USCIS phased out physical checks, so we have transitioned to using ISSE's P card, and our business office will reconcile with your department. I think everybody's been using that payment information form pretty well. We haven't had any problems so far, but just let us know if there's any questions. And with that, we'll open it up for more questions.
Okay, so Morgan and I was able to manage majority of questions through Q&A. Where can we have one question Morgan is typing now, but I figured to read it out loud. Where can the payment form be funded? Are you
I'm typing the
referring?
link in.
Okay,
Yeah, so Morgan's typing the link in there, and then that form, the form, I believe, is embedded in the e-form, but it's part of the Canvas and it's part of the H-1B checklist. So it's part of the H-1B checklist, the TN checklist, the E3 checklist, and the EB2, lawful permanent residence, the perm process for teaching positions. It's embedded in all of the checklists, and then it should be, I think, in the Canvas. And then we're working on embedding it into the e-forms. And then you can upload it into the e-form itself. And then Kayleen Lilly said, just to clarify, OPT is considered a change of status. So the fee, yes. So for change of status, extension, amendment, and change of employer, we don't have to worry about that $100,000 fee. It's just like always has been. And you know, the only trick, I guess, why I meandered on change of status is that the person has to be in the US, and this has always been the case. The person has to be in the US when we submit the petition. And for change of status, they need to remain in the US until it is finally approved. So there's no, departing to visit mom in, Mexico or wherever. There's no, sometimes students on F1 will run out of their time, but the job is offered. But, if they run out in May and the job doesn't start till August, they'll sometimes go home and do consular process, come back. But we can't do consular basically. So we can do change of status and all the other. And I think I'm just reading these out loud, if that's okay. I think Winslow's asking that we can only file 6. It's true. So that's the rub, I guess, is USCIS can take 8 months as long as they want, but we can still only file 6 months in advance, which obviously does not seem fair. That is the earliest we can submit it to USCIS. It's actually the earliest that we can file that labor certification. But you could, you can send us the e-form like 7 months out. If it's ridiculously far, if it's like a year out, we may actually cancel the e-form and ask you to redo it a little bit sooner to the date. But you can send them to us a little early so we can kind of look at it, make sure we can do the prevailing wage. And then if we see a problem, we can head that off. But, so if you want to get the e-form to us like 7 months out, that's fine. But we can only submit it to USCIS 6 months out from the new start date.
I'll go over the next question. It's actually the J question. Even though we're doing the H-1B webinar, we actually had a J1 webinar yesterday for our paid scholars. This is regarding the ASU PPO insurance policy. Terry's asking whether this will be sufficient. To answer this question, the ASU's insurance policy PPO effective January 1st, 2026 will not make J1 scholar meet the insurance requirement set by a State Department. With that said, the J1 scholar must purchase external insurance policy to meet the J1 requirement. Terry, we can connect separately so we can provide more information. But HR and ISSC sent out an email to all the J1 paid scholars. So currently they have the option to enroll ASU insurance, but to meet J1 insurance requirement, they must purchase external insurance policy just to be in compliance.
And if time allows, I just read someone's question that's already been answered. But if you hadn't had time to read the questions, this was a good one. I kind of went over J for postdocs, kind of on the assumption that they're, that would be if they're out of the US and we want to bring them in the US. It's true if somebody is here on F1 and, you know, they're finishing their PhD, then they want to do a postdoc. If they're already on F1 and they are eligible, they should be able to get OPT and then usually the STEM extension, that is also fine to use for postdoc. We see that a lot, and that's a good use of the OPT STEM program. And then hopefully, you know, at the end, either at the end of that postdoc or maybe they get a permanent job, then we switch them to H-1B. But yeah, so for people who are already here in F1, that's fine. It's just if you've got a new hire from Germany, they can't come on F1 because F1 is for international students, but you could bring them on J for a postdoc. And I see L1A and L1B. Chungning kind of answered that. As far as I know, the L1 is intercompany and like multinational company, which I don't think we're able to do. That's, you know, the TNE3, J1, and O1 are really the only ones I think we have done. I mean, and again, you know, there's probably people here on other statuses, but they've already been in the US. So our main concern is when you're trying to hire, you've done a search, you have this perfect person, but again, they're in Germany. We can't bring them on H-1B without paying $100,000. What else can we do? So those are, you know, hopefully O1, unless it's a postdoc, then maybe we can do J1. Well, I guess if there are no other questions, I think we've covered everything. I'm still sort of scrolling the questions to see if there's anything great to share. I know I think I tried to scare everybody about change of status and doing it early, but it's true we can only submit it 6 months in advance. But it's always good to just know when people's EAD cards will be expiring, so that we can plan in advance.
We have a
Yeah, I'm not
question.
seeing anything else.
It's about the insurance, but this webinar is actually focused on the H-1B proclamation. So Heather, if you don't mind sending us an email. I see your point, but because the university want to make sure the J program is in compliance. So any pay ASU scholar do have the option to waive ASU insurance and then decide to purchase external insurance coverage. However, we do have some J scholars who still like to enroll in ASU insurance, and I know that because the PPO covers in network and out of network. But from compliance perspective, is we look at as long as a J1 pay scholar has external insurance that meet the J requirement, that's all we look at. So if they decide to go for in addition, that wouldn't be necessary concern from the way that State Department look at it. You have a question, is the 100K H-1B fee a one-time fee per employee or per petition?
It would be per petition is what I've read. So
Oh, per employer, I apologize. Yeah, per
yeah.
petition, right, but ASU's position is not going to cover this, so I think our goal will be focused on continuing supporting our employees, mainly through change of status, making sure we educate our foreign nationals or employees not to travel outside the US until the H-1B petition is approved.
For Robert's asking, did something happen to Synapses? Is this just today?
Couple things, if you're working remotely, make sure you connect to VPN. If not, you're still getting a denial message, send us an email, we can look into that for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any sort of system-wide issues, but it's often the VPN and just making sure you're connected to the VPN, then like logged into my ASU, then logged into Synapses. So, all right. Well, thank you for joining us. And was there anything else, Chun-Ying?
No, and we're here and you'll have our email address. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. We're recording this webinar, right? So, we'll work with our tech team, see if we can post on our YouTube channel, I believe. If not, just let us know if you have any additional questions. And thank you so much for joining today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.